I'm Martin Rust with the Security and Policy Institute of Professional Development here at the University of Ottawa. My guest this afternoon is Philippe Lagassé. Phil is an associate professor here at the University of Ottawa in the areas of public and international affairs. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.
We've been talking about geopolitical events and their impact here in Canada, and I want to switch our attention to the way forward. We're heading into an election period, and I think perhaps for the first time, security issues, at least in the broader context, in Canada's place in the rest of the world, will undoubtedly be part of that discussion throughout the election campaigns. Can you identify some of those areas that you think will be important?
Well, currently what we see is a divide between the three parties on what I would say are two fundamental questions, namely Canada's role militarily in the world, where you have the Conservative Party that desires Canada to have a robust and combat-capable military that it's deeply involved and at the front lines of major international events. And you have the Liberal Party and the New Democratic Party, which would like Canada to resume its activities as more of an honest broker and more of a peace-supporting power. So that's a pretty important divide. Fundamentally, though, they seem to agree generally that Canada needs a stronger military capability going forward, and that spending levels on the military should be maintained. But ultimately, how they're going to use the military if they were to form government may be an important difference that Canadians are going to recognize. And I think certainly with respect to how the parties voted on ISIS, we see a pretty different philosophical vision of where Canada should be acting and how it should be acting in the world. Another major difference I would identify is between the Liberals and the Conservatives, who tend to agree on the need for greater internal security capability through C-51, and the NDP, which tends to be more skeptical of such endeavors. What I find disconcerting going into the election campaign is that we're not talking about certain issues that really should be at the forefront of the agenda. Namely, none of the parties are really paying enough attention to cybersecurity and our cyber vulnerabilities.
Right.
Similarly, none of the parties are paying enough attention to critical infrastructure protection and our lack of resilience as a country. And really those need to be massively augmented if we are to play a greater role in the world, because fundamentally, if you're not secure and resilient at home, you are vulnerable to actors that would dissuade you from acting internationally by attacking you within your homeland.
My sense is that our vulnerability in the areas of infrastructure is actually pretty significant. Do you want to talk at all about sort of perhaps the scale and scope of just how vulnerable we are in some of those areas?
Well, let's look at the cyber realm as one example. There are areas we don't yet have an integrated cyber defense strategy for Canada. We don't really have our own agency that is able to do that effectively. Now that affects Canadians as much as it does the government. Government computer systems, government information systems are vulnerable to attack, are constantly being attacked. Private financial firms are constantly being surveilled and attacked. And eventually, if we don't address this, it will impact us in a very significant fashion in ways that Canadians really can't even imagine. Similarly, when it comes to natural disasters and those types of events, or massive catastrophic terrorist attack against, let's say, power plants or our nuclear capabilities or others, that would be a significant event that we don't have the ability to respond to. Now, that may seem alarmist for some, but really think about how effectively we'd be able to respond to massive flows of people in a Canadian urban center that are without water, without electricity, and without what they need, let's say even in a winter setting. We don't yet have those capabilities, and if two attacks happen simultaneously, we would be in a very bad position. Now, these are areas that we need to address going forward if we're to be a stronger and more resilient country.
And my sense is that as public awareness grows around security issues in general, and the impacts of some of these events that are happening in different parts of the world, there will be a greater appetite at home for politicians and policy makers to lead a little bit more in this area. Because at the moment, as I understand you saying, we're very reactive in those areas and therefore very vulnerable.
Well, that's right. I think we have not yet come to grips with the vulnerabilities that we face today. And as Canadians, we still tend to view the world in very traditional geographic senses. Namely, we are in North America. We're isolated from the rest of the world. our neighbor to the south is relatively friendly, and the Arctic is not yet a region of major conflict. Unfortunately, that vision of our isolation and our safety ignores transnational threats, electronic threats, digital threats, and the other types of groups and individuals that are able to undermine your security and your stability through very effective means. So we're not yet caught up with the reality of security in the 21st century.
I read a report the other day that said there have already been 10 times the number of cyber attacks on the Canadian government in the first 3 months of this year than they were in all of last year.
Right.
And yet we're not talking about that very much. That's not very public information, and yet it's not part of the public debate. What's it going to take to make this a more real and relevant part of the public discourse?
Well, unfortunately, if social science theory tells us anything, it's that big change happens after catastrophic events. And I'm very much worried that it's only going to be a catastrophic event, something major, where Canadians are deprived of major government service, or the Canadian government can't respond, or there's a major attack on the financial sector that really impacts Canadians day to day, that is going to force us to change and take these matters seriously. Now, I only hope that the security community in Canada can do the preparatory work for that, so that when it happens, we have a plan and an idea of how to defend ourselves again in the future.
These are exactly the kind of issues that we're going to probe further into at the Institute here at the University, so thank you very much for being here. I'm Martin Rust with the Security and Policy Institute of Professional Development here at the University of Ottawa. My guest is Philippe Lagassé, Associate Professor here at the University in Public Affairs and International Affairs. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.